What advice do you have for an Indian student who wants to go into research and they want to go abroad?
It is extremely important to have somebody who is supportive, empathetic, and most importantly, excited, if I may put it that way, about your research.
Hello, Nikunji, and welcome to PhD Hard Talk. Thank you so much for wanting to have a conversation with me and to discuss your current research and any advice that you may have for future students. Welcome.
Thank you so much for this kind invitation, Noma. It's always lovely to interact with potential candidates and be of assistance to them, especially as an international applicant. And hopefully, let us say, my experiences might be of help to candidates in the future. So thank you once again for having me.
Excellent. So in terms of your current research topic, could you take us through that and introduce what it is and where you are based?
So to briefly introduce myself to the viewers, my name is Nikunj Kulshreshtha. I am currently working as an assistant lecturer at OP Jindal Global University in the law department, where I teach subjects of criminal law, which is my forte. So I teach the penal code, the criminal procedure, and the evidence as part of my teaching abilities. I also research in these areas. So that is what essentially I do as a researcher and as an academic. As far as my doctoral topic is concerned, which was part of my applications this year, my doctoral topic inquires into the possibility of framing a gender neutral rape law in India. Now, the reason why I took up this topic, it was also, by the way, part of my LLM thesis. So I wrote it on the essentially the same topic, got a distinction for it. I was pretty proud of the research that I did. Now, one of the reasons why I have chosen this topic, obviously, the first one is to contribute to original research, scholarly literature on this topic. But the primary, or I would say the motivational reason behind taking up this kind of topic is my deep-seated interest in the development of a harmonious, society, social harmony in society, where gender roles and gender stereotypes do not affect how we live and function on a daily basis. I would like to share a very example from my teenage years, which was a huge, I would say, an epiphany moment for me to understand how gender is understood and analyzed by society. So this incident is from my teenage years. Say I was about 10, 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to be invited to the locality's birthday parties. So, the kids' birthday parties, everybody was invited to them. So I'll paint a caricature of the scenario that I noticed in every house for the viewers.
Okay.
So whenever I used to go there, I noticed that the father of the child in question was sitting in a room, maybe doing something, or generally uninterested, and sitting to talking to some friends, not exactly assisting in anything. The children were running around the house and playing and having fun that was there, and the mothers essentially were toiling hard in the kitchen preparing a meal for, say, 30 to 40 odd people.
Yeah.
And if you understand anything about traditional Indian society, buying food off the shelf is generally looked down upon. So imagine having a 3-course meal, and which is to be prepared and served to 30, 40 kids over a course of, let's say, 2-3 hours. So it's quite a toll. At best, she will have some help from, let's say, a friend who is volunteer to come early, or maybe let's say some household help maids, as we like to call them. So at best 2 people dealing with 30 to 40 people.
Yes.
And imagine the amount of work that is there. So you'll start off with the first course where there's some chips, some cake, some, let's say, some savory and other things. Then the next meal is a full course meal. Then you have, let's say, ice cream. Then there is return gifts and other things. Now, what I noticed was that the woman was toiling hard, the mother of the child, and nobody was essentially assisting her. So I started assisting them in a couple of these parties. I started off by, say, let's say if they gave me a soda in a bottle, I will share the soda to other kids and then pass it on and pass with the plates. The other kids, when they saw me doing this, found it pretty weird. So the children questioned me that, why are you doing this, Nikunj? So I said that the poor woman is toiling hard and it wouldn't exactly kill us to help her a little, it's not exactly hurting us.
Mhm.
They weren't very satisfied with with this explanation of mine. They said that we are not servants
Mhm.
and we are here to have fun.
Of course.
That and when I refused to listen to them, they started mocking me in the upcoming parties. That whenever I used to go, they'd be like, "Okay, the servant is here; he's going to do everything." Now
Mhm.
that was my first enlightenment as to gender roles and so gender conditioning as to how they work in society. I
Mhm.
mean, I have understood feminism and other things way later in my life. I mean, I did a course on feminism in my law school, which was I was around 26 years old. So at that age, it was not exactly something as a cause. It was something that came as naturally to me. I saw somebody who was toiling hard. I decided to help her. I
Yeah.
didn't realize that there were so many gendered,
Yeah.
nuances to it, if I may put it that way. And it was quite interesting for a teenage boy at that age to understand that how deeply entrenched these gender roles and these things are.
Just to ask, I understand what you're saying. Is it more of a cultural push, or is it more on gender? Because usually when it comes to roles, culture pushes more, and religion to push more in terms of stereotype and behaviors and conduct, what we can and cannot do. Do you think that's the other reason why, or is it more of it's just gender rules?
I think your explanation is correct. It's more about putting the cart before the horse. So yes, cultural issues are which emanate and create gender roles and conditioning and expectations. So yes, the cultural grooming of, let's say, men was in a certain manner and women is in a certain manner, which is across the globe. Essentially, it's the
Yes,
same
it
issue.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, for a teenage boy, that was a very deep experience. And if I may share this with the viewers, I shared this experience with with the interviewers for my doctoral application, and they were
Okay.
quite impressed as to how, at a young age, I understood how gender matters and how. So this is possibly, I could say, one of the larger motivations that I have with
Mhm.
respect to this topic, and why this whole analysis is quite titillating to me, if I may put it that way. As far as the other parts of the topic are concerned, so my topic essentially has four research questions.
Yeah.
The first question is, how is a victim in society constructed in India? So
Mhm.
the construction of, let's say, a sexual assault victim, say based on judicial precedents or other things, is of a stereotypical, let's say, media created howling and screaming and this typical scenario. And it is representation of, let's say, physical prowess of the perpetrator on the victim. Then
Mhm.
in a society which subscribes too much to toxic masculinity, it's very difficult to portray men to be victims.
Mhm.
It becomes a hindrance in the envisaging of the same by the criminal justice machinery. So that is the first question that I deal with. The
Can I
second
just
question.
ask on the first question there?
Sure,
Um,
sure.
in terms of victims, I mean, we've seen on the news here whereby most victims have been women on trains. Do we get victims who are males as well, who are raped, or is it just mainly female? Because that's what we receive in terms of the whole world when it comes to rape cases in India.
Yeah, so that's a very good question, because that is one of the major objections to the framing of a gender neutral rape law.
Yeah.
As per the latest statistics by US, UK, and Canada, 15% of men face sexual harassment and are sexually assaulted over their lifetime, which I feel is a pretty high number. So the next question in my research is, what are the reasons specifically which are hindering men and transgenders to be recognized as victims? Is it the construction of gender? Is it the way the legal system is framed? Are there other traditional ways of looking at it? So on and so forth.
To ask, transgender is such a sensitive and hot topic globally, as you know. How is it in India currently, in terms of current situation? How are transgender people viewed in terms of society?
They are essentially looked down as an aberration, or say some sort of the third person. Even speaking about it, makes me uncomfortable, because they are looked as the othered in society.
Right.
The thing is, and this is where both, since my research is comparative with UK and Canada as well, so it would make sense, because the framing of the law in both India and UK is similar. If you go into the roots of how rape law has been framed in India and UK, it is essentially based on historic understanding of sexual relations between a heteronormative cisgender couple. And because every other form of sexual relations were criminalized at the time, adultery was punishable, and so was others. And there is a very traditional understanding of what sexual violence is, violation of the orifice, if I may put it that way.
Yes.
So there's a very regressive understanding of what constitutes sexual violence. That is A. And there is also a lot of issue with respect to how things are being understood by the members of the criminal justice machinery. See, you and I may frame a law, but if the police officer is not convinced of the relevance of the law, or whether men are victimized, then that is going to be a problem. And especially for the UK audience, if I may, cater to it, in 2010, a government study by Miss Baroness Vivian Stern, it was called the Stern Review, said that after 25 years of framing the law for male rape, men still are afraid to approach police officers and the criminal justice machinery for either the fear of being branded as homosexual or for being disbelieved. So, if I may put it that way, the issues facing the victims of sexual violence across all genders are essentially, I would say, similar, if not same.
Yeah.
And which is why I'm pushing for a gender neutral rape law, so that under the same umbrella and the same empathy and the same process, we are able to provide justice to everyone. And, to put it in political terms, let us fight this together rather than with one another, is what is the idea.
But I would like to think that India is quite diverse when it comes to religion, culture, and also caste. I find that will make it rather complex for you to achieve what you want to achieve, because when it comes to caste, based on my understanding, certain groups have more power and authority. How do you plan on ensuring that they will understand and believe in the same vision that you have?
Well, essentially, influencing policy is not exactly part of my research. That is one of the romantic notions that we hold as academics, that our research will someday influence. But I feel one of the reasons that I could put them on board is two things. One is a theoretical rationale that I have. So India and UK are a common law country.
Yeah.
Common law is based on the definition of Sir William Blackstone, who says that let 10 guilty person escape rather than one innocent suffer. So the rationale that even if one man is suffering, 15% is still a high number. And unfortunately, we do not have research statistics in India with respect to male victimization of sexual violence. But I'm saying that even if one man suffers, I think that is sufficient for us to change the law. So that is one of my theoretical, yes, I know it is stretching the principle a bit, but as I said, I didn't create it. It's you say we are a common law country. I'm just following the principle.
No, I understand, but I guess in terms of the audience at home, I'm just trying to think that it's great to hear what you're saying, right? But in terms of implementation, the policy writers, they're the ones who influence a lot more, and they're the ones to drive the change, as politicians do. For example, in the UK, we had the slogan "New Labour." It's still Labour, but they just put "new" in front, for example, to make it relevant and fit for purpose. So now I guess what I'm trying to understand is, if I am a transgender and I am in India and I've been raped and I've gone through, such a terrible time, I would love to know that, there's something else that's being done. I know you're doing the research, there's no data. I can understand why there's no data, because it's something that's never been seen as, you know, if you are transgender, you are a part of society. It's still something that we globally, we're still getting used to, and to understand what it is to be transgender, whether woman or male, if you understand what I mean. And I guess I'm trying to see as to how your research would benefit that community specifically.
I think this is where I would humbly admit that even I am learning a lot of things. I am understanding a lot of concepts. I'm understanding how, what is queer, what is gender fluidity. That's, in fact, that is one of the, arguments in my research, Noma. What I'm trying to suggest is that we need to move as a society from a gendered and a sexualized understanding of sexual violence to a place where as simple as non-consensual touching of an individual, sexual touching, should constitute sexual violence. And there is a precedent for this, because this is what Canada has done. So if you read the definition of sexual violence Canada, they have very clearly provided a definition based on non-consensual touching of an individual. And then they have aggravated degrees to it. So based on whether you use deadly force or other things, it will be more severely punished, and so on and so forth.
So I guess, in terms of your research, are you opting to mix and match different models? For example, you've just mentioned the one in Canada, to mix the model in Canada, mix the one in the UK, try and bring a bit of element of culture, because I feel like religion and culture, they play such a big role, and usually they're not mixed into policies, are they? But they influence a lot more, because in communities, based again on research, my understanding is that you go to the community, you present the case, they deal with it. It doesn't go to the police. And you have certain groups that would go to the police, but usually the communities, they're the ones to deal with formal issues in a formal way, the way they see fit. So I'm just trying to understand how the law can play with that.
So that is a much larger debate that will not be possible to address via my research. Because there, let me just give an example of, how there, let me just put it out there. So the law on child marriage prevention in India has been since 1929. All right. Yet unofficially and in different manners, India has had child marriages even today, and say about 30% of girls within the age of 9 to 18 do get betrothed or are, put in the arranged marriage system today. So implementation of the law is a completely different aspect to my problem. And if I may put it that way, for people to understand how, framing a topic works in research, there is a stage where you first define what the crime is, and then you focus on its implementation. My research is essentially at a primary stage where I'm even defining how the crime is and how it should be. Only when it is framed later, then I can, get into, okay, why is it not being implemented? In fact, let me give you an example, because I'm working on this paper. So I'm writing a paper on the laws which prevent prior sexual history, to be admitted into evidence.
Okay.
Now these laws have been framed in India since 2013. And when I conducted a research over the past 8 years of reported judgments, I found hardly 10 cases which even discussed this very section.
Wow.
So the point is, the law has been there, but a gendered and let's say a limited understanding of how this law works, and the cultural aspect, as you like to call it, does influence. So that's what I'm saying. That is the secondary part of the study which I can do, because the law is there. But in my case of a gender neutral rape law, we are yet to begin the conversation of, what are the issues. We have to first get there to frame it before we can move to the next step. So my study, if I may put it, is very nascent. The field of gender neutrality in rape law, if I may put it that way, is very nascent in India and generally in the global south. So it will still take some getting used to reach a place where we can get into the issues which are which will affect the framing of the law.
No, that's excellent the way you've put it. So to move on to the next point, which is the objective number 3.
So the third point of my research is essentially the final point, which is, as you said, that I'm taking different context. So I'm saying gender neutrality in rape law is framed differently across the world by different jurisdictions.
Yeah.
Say UK has 2 separate laws for different genders, depending on, they have one, the traditional definition of rape in Section 1 of the Sexual Offences Act, and then they have a generic definition to take into male and transgenders and gender fluid persons under Section 2. So there's a distinction in how they have recognized male and transgender sexual victimization, but it is put in a separate category to, if I may put it delicately, preserve the traditional understanding of the crime in question.
Yeah.
So that's how UK has done it. Canada in 1985 has completely revamped their sexual violence law to be completely degendered and desexualized. So it is, all genders, all sexual identities are accepted and they are judged by the same law. Australia has done something else. So my point is, I will be referring to all of these, academic literature and research in these countries to understand the issues that has come in dealing after framing those laws, and which approach could be best suited for the Indian context. So to give an example, this is also one of the objections that come to framing a rape law, in gender neutral rape law in India, that men and transgenders are covered by Section 377, which was essentially, a crime that was a moral crime, if I may put it that way. Yes. It was framed as a crime against sexual contact against the order of nature. Mm-hmm. And it was basically an umbrella term to cover all forms of non-heteronormative cisgender sexual relations. So, bestiality, let's say anal sex, anything as such. Mm-hmm. In fact, it was recently decriminalized. My research says that when the law is framed in a manner which is there with a particular outlook, was there to protect societal morality, mm-hmm. I am not sure that referring to it in the context of male or transgender rape will be any help, because the outlook towards that law has not changed. Right. If you frame the law in a specific manner, yes, you may say that we don't interpret that way, but that is how the world understands it. Mm-hmm. So that is one of the ways I wish to deal with these objections with respect to the framing of the law and so on and so forth. So finally, that is how I will come. And if I may put it that way, I am not exactly close-minded to say that, okay, a separate law may be framed for men if, issues might come up. But Canada seems to be very successful with their approach. Mm. So the point is that there is a lot to, explore there as to what will be the best suited for the Indian context. And yeah, I'm assuming that is how I will conclude on my point in my research.
That is amazing. I mean, in terms of how you've explained everything, and thank you so much for explaining. I guess in terms of India currently, are we, as a country, I would say, are we still experiencing a lot of rape cases that are not dealt with, or that are dealt with, but there's no positive outcome when it comes to such cases due to gender bias?
Yes, and it affects the women even more, as I wouldn't want to even begin the place where men and others can be taken as victims. I can understand that, and I would like to explain our viewers why. Mm-hmm. So essentially, Global South and specifically India is a sex negative society. Right. Now, a sex negative society is one which looks down and morally abhors sexual relations, mm-hmm, outside the traditional lens of marriage, or for, say, the use of procreation. Okay. So any other form of sexual relations, or say, is looked down upon, is abhorred, is not taken well by the community. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem with that setup is that it tends to create a lot of regressiveness and frustration in the average person. Okay. From what I understand. Okay. Which manifests itself in different ways. So, to answer your question, that traditional victims, even if they complain and let's say a woman gets raped, the community wouldn't want to engage in some sort of, say, scandal by admitting the unfortunate traumatization of the victim. They would rather prefer to, sweep it under the rug, if I may put it that way,
Yeah.
by suggesting marriage or other ways of compensation. So unfortunately, the problem with the sex negative society is that the stigmatization of a sexual crime is a far larger crime against the society and the person than the individual's traumatic experience, and which is something that, as a cultural and a society, we have to evolve first before we are able to openly provide help to such victims irrespective of their gender.
No, that is quite interesting to hear that, to balance the scales in a way that you will be encouraged to get married essentially to the person that raped you, and and live with the trauma and the PTSD behind that. It's quite it's a big shocker. But to move on in terms of our discussion then, as a PhD student, I know you're doing your teaching as well, and you're publishing at the same time. What advice do you have for an Indian student who wants to go into research and they want to go abroad? What advice would you give them in terms of the application process?
So one of the advice that I would render is to create a proper, let's say, an Excel sheet or a Word document in a tabular format to keep track of different kinds of, I would say, the application sizes, the research proposals tend to be different, the kinds of demands they will make. So I would like to talk about my experience. So I applied to a total of 12 universities.
Wow.
Across 3 different continents. And I'm not even going to go into the amount of supervisors I approached. So I spoke to people at 40 different universities. It was insane with respect to the correspondence and the keeping tracks of different time zones, so on and so forth. So I applied to 3 universities in Australia, about 8 in UK, that includes two in Scotland, and about 2 in Canada. Okay. So that is, I covered a lot of countries.
Yeah.
Now, the first and the most important advice that I would have for international scholars, not only from India, is to understand the seriousness and depth that is required to find a good supervisor. Now, I would like to provide a particular context here, because that would be relevant for, let's say, especially global South scholars as compared to, let's say, scholars from the North. In
terms of the audience at home, they may not know what Global South is, because I got a message previously about the sub-Saharan region, and you just run off and you don't realize that some people don't know. So could you please explain what the Global South is?
Oh yeah, of course. I'm so sorry about that. So global South basically refers to Eastern developing nations of Asia, Africa, and all other countries. Global North is usually referred to the traditional Anglophone and, let's say, developed nations, if I may put it that way. So that's the essential definition. So now coming to the context as to why this process is important. Now, in UK and other countries, although in the North and other places, you have to select a supervisor. You have to go through the application process. You have to coordinate with them, and they will make a huge difference in terms of your experience of the university as well as the process. In India, it's a completely different process. Right. Since the population is such high, we don't really have a concept of, say, scholars, aspiring doctoral candidates ever interacting with their doctoral supervisors. They have to clear an entrance exam, which is based on a competitive, something similar of, let's say, MCQs or something. Okay. And then appear for an interview with a panel of, let's say, senior academics at the university that you choose to. So there is absolutely no application process, at least with respect to references and other things. Yes, we do have, let's say, a formal doctoral application, but the traditional way as it works in Western societies, where you get in touch with a relevant scholar, academic, and you say that, sir, I'm very interested in your research, and ma'am, I would like to, ask you to be. That's not how it works in India. So first of all, it's very important for people to understand the importance as well as the relevance of having a good doctoral supervisor. So that
Yeah.
is A. The second advice that I have is that I wouldn't want to underestimate the relevance as well as the importance of having somebody who will be mentoring you for 3-4 years of your life. I want scholars to understand, and let me emphasize, I cannot emphasize this enough. You are placing your life in somebody else's hand for the next 3 to 4 years, depending
Literally,
on where
yeah.
yeah, you are, it's literally the relationship between a child and, let's say, who is learning to walk, and let's say a parent who is, giving the child a little finger, hold my finger,
Mhm.
and let's walk this path. And why I say this, I'll soon get to my I would say interesting and hilarious interactions with Western academics, if I may put it that way. It'll be sure entertaining for the viewers, if not anything else.
Uh-huh.
But it is extremely important to have somebody who is supportive,
Right.
empathetic, and most importantly, excited, if I may put it that way, about your research.
Yeah.
I wouldn't like to talk about other people, but I want somebody who is jumping out of the chair and has as much passion as I do. That, like, wow, this is something mind breaking. Let's take it up. Let's do this. That it's that kind of passion that I look for in my supervisor,
Mhm.
because 3 to 4 years is a really long time. You are far away from home. You are at the financial dependence of the scholarship that you are there, and not having a supervisor who is supportive and empathetic will increase the mental as well as other kinds of toll on your health, on your well-being. So please do not underestimate the seriousness of the supervisor that you are dealing with. Now, to talk about my experiences with, as I said, academics around the world, and this is
Mhm.
going to be a fun conversation. So I applied to 3 universities in Australia: the
Yeah.
Australian National University, the University of Sydney,
Mhm.
and University of New South Wales. So one of the things, now this is also important for scholars, when you are looking for a supervisor, it is not essential that they will be doing exactly the same topic that you are doing.
Mhm.
So let's say in something, let's say, as you are in HR, your supervisor might be, let's say, a doctoral, let's say, expert in recruitment, but that doesn't mean that they will not take up, let's say, morale boosting or other areas of research.
Mhm.
So my suggestion to potential candidates, is read their publications and the research work that they have done from the last 3 to 5 years, to
Mhm.
get an understanding as to what they are doing. That is A. And B, I would say, send them in a formal email saying that you are making an application this year in the month of, let's say, July, between July to August, considering that the process starts in October and November, for two things. One is that they might offer you some very valuable feedback on your proposal, that, okay, change this, change that, which will be very beneficial to you and will help you gain clarity over your work. Second is that people's equations keep changing. So somebody might be planning to leave the university as soon as you join in. Somebody might be going on a maternity leave. Somebody may have been doing this topic for a decade and is no longer interested in this topic anymore. They want to try something new.
Yeah.
So this correspondence is very important, and this is where the fun starts. So I emailed 4 professors at University of New South Wales, and nobody replied back.
Mhm.
And also, before I continue further, the application process in Australia is a tad different from other places.
Right.
Unlike other places where you can directly send a formal application once the process starts, Australia does not allow that. They have something which is known as an expression of interest, which
Okay.
is essentially the same thing, but it is so what it is that they'll say, give you a form with all the possible details of your application, and you have to submit it to the doctoral, let's say, research committee, which is some undergrads and doctoral scholars who will give it some preliminary check to see that if you're even eligible, have you scored the relevant academic credentials that are required, before they will allow you to make a formal application. So this one thing is something that scholars need to be aware about and keep in mind while they are applying to Australia. So nobody responded to my application in New South Wales. So the university's, as I said, journey ended there.
Mm-hmm.
At Australian National University, I did find supervisors, and I made a formal application, which in the end essentially was unsuccessful.
Right.
At the University of Sydney, I did find a supervisor. My expression of interest was accepted, and I was asked to make a formal application. But the attitude of the supervisor essentially was negative in
Okay.
my correspondence with them.
Yeah.
So, to give an example, she specifically wrote a point where she said that, yes, I'll be happy to supervise your doctoral project and do make an application, so on and so forth. However, considering the high criteria of admission at Sydney, I'm not sure whether it will be easy for you to secure funding. Now, I understand that the person in question was trying to be a mentor and maybe saying this out of goodwill. But if these are your views, I'm not exactly sure why would you put me through the process of making an application where even you are not convinced. And I want to, scholars to understand why it is
Yeah.
important for your doctoral supervisor to believe in you. There is a lot of internal funding that is not accessible to the public outside, which is at the discretion of supervisors, or
Mm-hmm.
they may have some internal, play that is out there. They are not going to take that effort if they are not interested in your proposal or don't think of you as a good candidate. So
Right.
it is important for scholars to be very careful with supervisors who generally don't hold good view of them. So, I would say maintain distance from such supervisors,
Mm.
which is why finally I made no application at Sydney and the journey of Australia ended over there. But actually, as I said, it will more is about to come. So the next country that I made an application is to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
I contacted supervisors at every good university. So as I said, some fun experiences. Toronto, like Oxford and Cambridge, seems to discourage potential candidates from sending emails to doctoral supervisors. They
Okay.
want you to go through the process before you can even decide who your supervisor, which I feel utterly ridiculous thought process. And when I still tried to, send an email to the supervisors, the
Mm-hmm.
response was a one-liner that make an application on this website. So I said I wouldn't exactly would want to work with this person. So Toronto ended there. The supervisors at McGill did not respond to my correspondence emails. At York, and this is why I often say correspond with as many people, potential people, with respect to your work. So Osgood Law School, I mailed a couple of people over there. One of them responded,
Mm-hmm.
and Noma, even if she was not going to be my direct supervisor, because she said that I'm not essentially an expert in gender and analysis because she only did criminal law,
Yeah.
the depth of the review she gave me on my doctoral proposal
Mm-hmm.
was overwhelming. Imagine 14 points written in
Wow.
depth as to what. Yes, I just can't believe how much she, assisted me despite being, not exactly being my main supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how much I was overwhelmed with respect to the review that I got on my proposal. So she, said, change this, change that. So even if you will not succeed, these kind of interactions do help in understanding as to how your research is going. So that is with respect to York. The professor at UBC, University of British Columbia, said that I am interested, but wanted to know more and never responded back.
Okay.
Finally, I made an application to Ottawa and Dalhousie. So again, to protect the confidentiality and myself as well, one of the supervisors at university, I won't name who,
Mm-hmm.
I got through the university. I even got funding for 1.5 years. So I got through that.
Mm-hmm.
But her attitude again was negative in correspondence.
Right.
I told her that, it will not be possible for me to come there only on 1.5, 2 year funding.
Mm-hmm.
And if there is something that you can do to assist me. And she gave a very obnoxious, let's say, response to my email saying that unfortunately I don't have any funds at my disposal to assist you.
Okay.
And okay, and So, I mean, I didn't take it forward from there, and I respectfully declined the admission and the funding, so that, because I was not interested in the supervisor anymore. I didn't exactly get in at the other place, so it didn't really matter much over there. So that's how Canada ended. Now UK. So I applied to two universities, or spoke to two supervisors in Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was very thrilled, for not exactly very thrilled, was okay with my project. She said, yes, I would be happy to supervise it. And she was an expert in that area. So I was happy that, okay, she is looking up to it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the fun part.
Go on.
I make the application.
Right.
After 2.5 months, I get a rejection saying that even though we have the relevant, we are a school that deals in this particular branch of law, criminal law, the supervision is not available for this academic year. Now, this came as a shock to me because, as I said, in the first correspondence itself, my supervisor was like, it's a good project, do this, and I will be happy to take it on board.
Mm-hmm.
Then I send an email saying that I have been rejected. Is everything all right? I didn't get a response to this date. I get an automatic reply, which was there to the email, saying that I'm going on a sabbatical from, say, January of this year to January of next year. Now, here is something that I would want to, even if, let's say, academics to understand, and scholars as well. Noma, I understand that the Western academics may not be as warm or forthcoming, or there might be some cultural differences. I'm aware of it. I'm willing to accept it, and I understand that, as I said, it may not be similar to what I am expecting at home.
Okay.
But just as, the concept of marriage, intimacy, and love and everything do not change, whether it is India, America, or anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So the concept of mentoring and sensitivity does not change just because I'm making an application to the West.
Yeah.
So if academics ever, if I hope someday, at least I'm hoping academics ever see this video, I want them to understand how mentally taxing this process of making an application,
Yeah.
and waiting for funding and waiting for the admissions, and it's borderline, I would say, constitutes mental traumatization.
Okay.
Can you imagine drafting 20 different applications of different sizes? Because let's say some proposal may demand tentative chapters of your possible thesis. Some may say, no, we don't want that. We want the methodology you are using. Somebody might say it has to be 1,500 words. Some will say it is okay if you go to 3,000.
Yeah.
So this process is borderline traumatization and mental, and for you to not even have enough respect. I'm not holding it against this person that, they went on a sabbatical.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't exactly would have killed you to send one email and said that, I was interested in this project, but I'm going on a sabbatical. I'm so sorry. Or it's beyond, I'm not exactly sure how to deal with this episode that happened there. So I would say that Western academics need to be a bit sensitive on this aspect, or maybe the supervisor in this case was, insensitive, or whatever that is out there. So that was an experience that I had. The other experience that I had at a Scottish university, which is where I will advise scholars to be careful of the communication that you're having.
Mm-hmm.
So when I sent the first email, he was very enthusiastic, very happy, and he said, yes, I will take it on board and I'll be happy to supervise.
Yeah.
But but there was a part of my research, which is something that I kind of forgot to talk about. So my research essentially has an empirical research part, where I will go and interview members of the criminal justice machinery, say judges, potential police officers, to understand whether, even if this law is framed, are these people ready to implement it.
Yeah.
But it is not exactly let's say, an essential part of my research. That is A, I will admit that. And B, I would humbly admit I do not have any training in empirical research methods.
Okay.
So I will admit that. So this supervisor says that I will not supervise your thesis if it is anything other than doctoral or theoretical. No, he didn't know. He was not comfortable with the whole empirical part.
Oh, yeah.
And when I made it clear that this is one of the, let's say, portions which I'm not too feel strongly about, I can drop it if you want. He kind of, his attitude towards the process changed.
Okay.
And when I finally made an application to the university, he rejected it within 14 days. So I'm just saying that pay attention to the tone that is happening, in terms of the communication that you're having. So there might be a negative tone which you might miss out,
Yeah.
and again, waste an application as well as making your references that are there. So that is something that needs to be taken into account by potential applicants and scholars when you are making that application to the university.
Wow.
Now why this is important, I would like to elaborate on that.
Uh-huh.
And this is again a cultural context comes over here. So I
Yeah.
have to give them two academic references, or if I've been working for too long, at least one academic, one professional. Now the thing is, Western academics will only send an application to a limited number of universities. They don't want to keep doing this. So let's say, I know I'm crazy, but people usually apply only to 4 or 5 places at a time, maximum 6 or 7.
Mm-hmm.
My supervisor got tired after a point, that I'm going to do one of the references and not more than that. So I would say keep a backup of people that you would want to, send letters of recommendation on your behalf. And the difference why I say cultural context is relevant here, they did not wanted to show me what they were sending
Okay.
as a letter of recommendation. In India, because there are, let's say, so much population, the referees will give you the letter of recommendation that take it and upload it wherever you feel like.
Okay.
So I want people to be aware of the difference in context that is here. That is A. And I also want them to understand that when you, especially somebody like me who has done a degree in the UK and has come back, your Western academics may not be thrilled with the idea of you going all gagas on 10-20 universities.
Mm-hmm.
And which is why also I may sound a little complaining about the supervisors, because forget everything else, even if I'm willing to forgive them for all the unfortunate experience I had, they wasted 2 applications unnecessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Those references were not needed, which is part of the process why I'm saying it is mentally taxing.
Right.
Those 2 references could have been saved. There was no need for me to waste time making those applications, if I may put it that way.
Is a lot to digest. And
Yeah.
I hope it does help somebody in terms of applying, and it doesn't just apply to people in India, it applies to everybody in the global south. When they are applying, as you mentioned, the time zones, the paperwork, the way it needs to be presented. And obviously we have our own cultural norms that we stick to and we think everybody's aware of. Again, that's another challenge. So it was amazing for you to go through, the process and how it was done and how you feel about it, because it's not just you. There's a lot of people that feel that way. I have one more question for you.
Yes.
Why did you agree to come on PhD Hard Talk?
I agreed to come because I want to provide a helping hand to the students who are making an applications in the next coming couple of years.
Okay.
I have gone through the process myself. I would have extensively gone through it, not to get into the kind of things that I have gone through. Mm-hmm. And I would want the coming candidates to be aware of the pitfalls, the nuances, and the other things that are there. Mm-hmm. Just to give one concluding example, I'm not pursuing my doctorate this year because I didn't get funding and I delayed it for a couple of years down the line. Mm-hmm. There was one supervisor who I was going gagas over. I didn't get into that uni. So I did get in there. I didn't get funding. And I thought that, okay, whenever I will go again, I will take this person. Mm-hmm. But once the process ended and I realized that that person had always been tardy in their communications, always late, always taking too many reminders. And after a point, not bothering, I got to see their real side, if I may put it that way. So I want the coming doctoral candidates to understand and to get in touch with at least 2 to 3 current doctoral students of this supervisor that you're going, mm-hmm. to understand the kind of person they are. Mm-hmm. because, as I said, it is a 4 year long commitment, 3 to 4 years. You're placing your life and the future of your academic career in their hands. I would want to be really careful about what I'm doing. So I hope the session and the discussion we have today will provide certain guidance to the coming candidates in terms of, how they should take it on board with respect to the entire process.
No, I mean, thank you again in terms of your kind words. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in today. Don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and share. And the new hashtag is hashtag project dissemination to the world. Let's get our voices heard and share our research and be one in the name of science. So thank you again, Nikunj, for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.